42 years ago, a 10-year-old girl vanished without a trace, and the man who took her was someone no one ever suspected. What really happened to her? And why does her story still matter today? Stay tuned to uncover a tale of love, betrayal, and promises that refuse to be forgotten. If you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping narratives like this one. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And after the story, I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened? Share your thoughts, theories, and reactions in the comments below. Your voice matters, and who knows? Your insight might just change how we see the whole story. You know, life has a funny way of reminding you that some things never really stay buried. I'm Ethan, just your average guy trying to make sense of the world at 52 years old. Life's been, well, let's just say it hasn't exactly gone according to plan. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and since then, my days have felt like they're on autopilot. Work, home, repeat. But today was different. Today, I went back to Willowbrook Nursing Home, where my mom used to live before she passed last year. It wasn't easy walking through those doors again. Every hallway smelled the same, a mix of antiseptic and faded memories. I told myself I was there to return a book to the little library in the lobby. That's all. Just drop off the book and leave. But as I turned the corner near room 214, something stopped me cold. A voice called out from behind me. "Ethan," it said. Not just any Ethan. My Ethan. And here's the kicker, it wasn't someone I recognized. At least, I didn't think so. I froze right there, halfway down the hall. When I turned around, I saw her, an older woman sitting in a wheelchair by the window. She looked frail but sharp-eyed, like she'd seen more than her fair share of life's secrets. Her silver hair caught the light streaming through the blinds, and for a moment, I thought maybe this was one of Mom's old friends. Someone who knew me when I was a kid. But no. That couldn't be it. Because when she spoke again, she didn't just call me by my name. She called me Little E. Little E. That ridiculous nickname only my childhood buddies, and my mom, ever used. No one else. Ever. So, naturally, I walked over to her. Slowly, cautiously, like you would if you were approaching a ghost. "Do I know you?" I asked. My voice came out rougher than I expected. Maybe because deep down, I already knew the answer. Or maybe because part of me didn't want to hear what she had to say next. The woman smiled faintly, her lips curling into something between amusement and sadness. "Not directly," she said. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was an edge to it, a kind of certainty that made my stomach twist. "But I've known about you for a long time, Ethan. Longer than you might realize." Okay, now I was officially creeped out. "What do you mean?" I asked. "How could you possibly know anything about me?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me with those piercing eyes. Then she leaned forward just enough to whisper, "Your mother talked about you all the time. About how proud she was of you. How much she loved hearing you laugh when you were little." Wait a second. Hold up. This wasn't possible. My mom hadn't mentioned anyone new during her last months here. In fact, most of her conversations revolved around family photos and crossword puzzles. So how did this stranger know these details? And why did she seem so familiar? I must have looked completely lost because the woman chuckled softly. It was unsettling, not in a menacing way, but more like she knew something I didn't. Something big. "You're wondering how I know all this," she said, almost reading my mind. "Let me tell you a story, Ethan. Years ago, before you were even born, your mother and I were close. Very close. We grew up together in the same neighborhood, shared secrets under the stars, dreamed about our futures. She always wanted a son. Always. And when she finally had you, she wrote me letters. Dozens of them. Letters filled with stories about you, your first steps, your love of baseball, even that silly nickname. At this point, I was gripping the handles of her wheelchair without realizing it. My heart was pounding like a drum. None of this made sense. If my mom had kept in touch with her best friend from childhood, wouldn't she have told me? Wouldn't I have met her at some point? Unless something happened. Something neither of them wanted to talk about. Why didn't she ever mention you? I blurted out, my voice cracking slightly. The woman sighed, her gaze drifting toward the window. For a moment, she looked impossibly sad, like she was carrying the weight of decades on her shoulders. Because we had a falling out, she admitted quietly. A bad one. Over something neither of us could forgive ourselves for. But even after all these years, I never stopped caring about her. Or about you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time, I thought I knew everything about my mom's life. Turns out, I didn't even scratch the surface. As I stood there, staring at this mystery woman, I realized two things. First, there was still so much I didn't understand about my own past. And second, I needed answers. Desperately. Tell me more, I said finally, pulling up a chair beside her. Start from the beginning. Please. And trust me, what she told me next changed everything. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when I thought I'd wrapped my head around the fact that this mysterious woman, Lillian Rose, knew so much about me and my mom, she dropped another bombshell. One that reached back into my childhood, stirring up memories I'd long since buried. You grew up near Brookside Orchard, she said matter-of-factly, her eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to deny it. And honestly, I couldn't. Because she was right. My family had lived just a mile away from that orchard for most of my childhood. It was where I spent countless afternoons climbing trees, picking apples, and, well, playing with Lila. Lila. Even now, saying her name feels strange, like whispering an old secret into the wind. She was my best friend growing up, the kind of kid who could charm birds out of trees if she wanted to. We were inseparable, always running wild through those rows of apple trees, pretending we were explorers or spies or whatever else our imaginations dreamed up that day. But then, she disappeared. Vanished without a trace one summer night when we were both 10 years old. No note, no explanation, nothing. The police searched for weeks, but they never found her. Eventually, everyone stopped talking about it, except for me. I never forgot her. Not really. Lillian must have seen something shift in my expression because she leaned forward in her wheelchair, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Do you remember her? She asked softly. The girl from the orchard? Of course I remembered her. How could I not? But what did Lillian know about Lila? What connection could possibly exist between them? Before I could ask, she continued. Her full name was Lila Mae Carter. She lived at St. Agnes Orphanage before she came to live with the Carters. They adopted her when she was 6. Wait. What? That part didn't make sense. The Carters were nice enough people, sure, but I'd always assumed Lila was their biological daughter. Why hadn't anyone told me the truth back then? And here's the thing, Lillian added, her tone heavy with meaning. She used to talk about you all the time. About how special you were to her. Special? Sure, we were friends, but... Then she hit me with the twist I wasn't prepared for. She told me once that you two promised to marry each other when you grew up. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Promised to marry each other? Was she serious? I mean, yeah, kids say stuff like that sometimes, but Lila and I don't remember ever making such a promise. Do I? I tried to process what she was saying, but my mind kept flashing back to those days in the orchard. To the way Lila would grin at me while dangling upside down from a tree branch, her pigtails brushing against the grass below. To the time she gave me half of her peanut butter sandwich because I'd forgotten mine at home. To the last conversation we'd had before she vanished, the one where she said she'd be leaving soon and I should take care of myself. At the time, I thought she meant she'd be moving away for the summer or something. But now, sitting across from Lillian, I wondered if she'd known more than she let on. If maybe she'd been trying to say goodbye. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lillian sighed, her gaze drifting toward the window again. "Because some promises deserve to be kept, Ethan. Even if it takes decades to find your way back to them." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and unshakable. As I left the nursing home that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about Lila, and about the life we might have had together if fate hadn't intervened. Little did I know, the story was far from over. The more I thought about Lila, the more questions bubbled to the surface. Questions that had gone unanswered for over 4 decades. That night after leaving the nursing home, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to the same mystery: where did she go? What happened to her? And why hadn't anyone found her? The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. I drove down to the local police station, hoping someone might still have records from that time. It felt like a long shot, after all, this was 42 years ago, but I had to try. The officer on duty, Detective Harris, turned out to be younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s. When I explained what I was looking for, he gave me a skeptical look but agreed to check the archives. "You're talking about the Carter case, right?" he asked as he scrolled through an ancient computer system. "Disappearance of a minor, summer of 1981. I nodded, leaning forward in my seat. "That's her. Lila Mae Carter." Detective Harris clicked a few buttons, then frowned at the screen. "Huh. Weird. What is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He glanced up at me. "According to this, there's no record of the family officially moving away. No forwarding address, no new school enrollment, not even a utility transfer request. Just, nothing. Nothing." That word hit me like a punch to the gut. How could an entire family just vanish without leaving a trace? Kids don't disappear into thin air, and neither do their parents. Something wasn't adding up. "What about the investigation?" I pressed. "Surely they interviewed neighbors, checked hospitals, something." Harris nodded, pulling up another file. "Yeah, they did. But here's the thing, back then, resources were limited. They canvassed the area, searched nearby woods, even dredged parts of the river, but came up empty-handed. After 6 months, the case went cold. No leads, no suspects, no explanations." As he spoke, I couldn't help but picture Lila as she'd been at 10 years old, bright-eyed, fearless, with a laugh that could light up a room. She didn't deserve to be forgotten like this. None of it made sense. "Did anyone ever hear from her again?" I asked quietly. Harris shook his head. "Not according to the file. Some folks claimed they saw her around town weeks after she went missing, but none of those sightings panned out. Others said the Carters left in the middle of the night, taking everything with them. But again, no proof." I sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. If the Carters really had left town, why would they do it so secretly? Why not tell anyone? And if they hadn't left, then where were they now? On the drive home, I replayed every detail in my head, searching for answers that weren't there. Then it hit me, the orchard. Lila and I used to spend hours playing there, hiding among the trees, pretending we were adventurers exploring uncharted territory. Could she have been there the night she disappeared? Was that where I should start looking? When I got back to my house, I pulled out an old shoebox from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were scraps of my childhood, photos, ticket stubs, notes passed between friends. Toward the bottom, I found what I was looking for, a faded Polaroid of Lila and me standing under one of the apple trees. We were grinning ear to ear, our arms slung over each other's shoulders like we owned the place. On the back, written in her messy handwriting, were the words, "Best friends forever." Forever. Such a big promise for two kids who barely understood the concept of time. But maybe Lillian was right. Maybe some promises are meant to last, even when life tries its hardest to break them. Because deep down, I knew one thing for certain, Lila hadn't just vanished. Someone, or something, had taken her. And I owed it to her to find out the truth. Sometimes, the past doesn't just knock on your door, it kicks it down. That's how I felt when Carla called me out of the blue yesterday. She sounded strange on the phone, her voice trembling like she was holding back tears or maybe just trying not to scream. "Ethan, you need to come over," she said. "I found something about Lila." Lila. Just hearing her name sent a shiver down my spine. Ever since my conversation with Detective Harris, I'd been turning the case over in my mind, piecing together fragments of memories and theories that led nowhere. But Carla? What could she possibly know about Lila? When I arrived at Mom and Dad's old house, Carla was waiting for me in the living room. The place looked exactly as it had before they passed, faded wallpaper, creaky floorboards, and that faint smell of cedarwood lingering in the air. Except now, there was an open wooden chest sitting on the coffee table between us. Inside were stacks of yellowed papers, old photographs, and what looked like a leather-bound journal. "This was in the attic," Carla explained, pointing to the chest. "Hidden in one of those locked drawers in Dad's study. Took me forever to find the key." I stared at her, stunned. Our dad wasn't the type to keep secrets, at least, not that we knew of. He was a simple man, practical and straightforward. So why would he lock away personal items like this? Carla handed me the journal first. Its cover was cracked with age, but the pages inside were surprisingly intact. As I flipped through them, I realized they weren't his notes, they were letters. Letters addressed to someone named Dr. Evelyn Meyer at Willow Creek Recovery Center. Willow Creek? I muttered under my breath. "What's that?" Carla shrugged. "From what I can tell, it was some kind of rehab facility for kids who'd experienced trauma. But here's the kicker, it looks like Dad made payments to them. Regular ones. And get this, they mention Lila by name." My stomach dropped. Payments? For Lila? What did our father have to do with her disappearance? Before I could ask more, Carla pulled out a photograph from the pile. It was a faded Polaroid of two children standing under an apple tree, the same one Lila and I used to climb. Only this time, it wasn't just the two of us smiling into the camera. There was writing on the back, "Ethan and Lila, Summer 1981. But below that, scrawled in pencil, were three words that stopped my heart cold: "She remembers everything." "Do you think she's still alive?" Carla asked softly, breaking the silence. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for another letter tucked inside the chest. This one was dated months after Lila disappeared, written in formal language that gave me chills. "Dear Mr. Thompson, thank you for your continued support regarding patient number 237. Her progress has been slow but steady. We assure you that confidentiality will remain our top priority. Patient number 237. That had to be Lila. But why would Dad send her to a recovery center without telling anyone? Better yet, why would he pay for it, and then hide all evidence of it? As I sifted through the rest of the documents, anger started bubbling up inside me. Anger at Dad for keeping this from us. Anger at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. And anger at whoever took Lila away in the first place. "We need to go to Willow Creek," I said finally, slamming the journal shut. Carla blinked at me, wide-eyed. "You really think she's there?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But if there's even a chance she is, we owe it to her to find out." Because deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lila hadn't vanished willingly. Someone had taken her, and now, 42 years later, it was time to bring her home. There are moments in life when the ground beneath you shifts, and everything you thought you knew crumbles into dust. For me, that moment came during a conversation with Nurse Margaret, the head nurse at Willowbrook Nursing Home. I'd gone back to see Lillian again, hoping she could fill in some of the gaps about Lila's past. But what I learned instead was far more devastating than I could have imagined. "Mr. Thompson," Margaret began cautiously, her hands clasped tightly around a clipboard, "there's something you should know about Mrs. Rose. Something important." I leaned forward, bracing myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. "She's been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's," she explained gently. "It's why her memory comes and goes. Most days, she struggles to recall recent events or even recognize familiar faces. But there's one thing she remembers vividly, her childhood. Especially you. Me. Of course it was me. From the moment I met her, Lillian had spoken as if she'd known me my entire life. And now, hearing this from Margaret, I couldn't help but wonder, was it possible? Could Lillian really be Lila? Before I could ask, Margaret continued. "We ran some tests after she arrived here last year. Her medical records showed a history of institutionalization dating back to when she was 10 years old. According to the documents, she was admitted to a psychiatric facility called Haven Hills." Haven Hills. The name sent a chill down my spine. Why would a 10-year-old girl end up in a place like that? Unless someone wanted her silenced. Margaret hesitated before speaking again, as if choosing her words carefully. The official diagnosis was paranoid delusions. They claimed she exhibited signs of severe mental instability, hallucinations, erratic behavior, things like that. But based on what I've seen here, I'm not so sure those labels were accurate. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She sighed, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was listening. "From what I understand, some families used places like Haven Hills as a way to dispose of problems. Children who spoke out against abuse, for example, were often labeled troubled and shipped off without question. If Mrs. Rose is who you think she is, then it's possible her time there wasn't about treatment. It was about control." Control. That word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. All those letters Dad had hidden, the payments to Willow Creek, the coded references to patient number 237, it all pointed to one horrifying conclusion: Lila hadn't disappeared willingly. Someone had taken her away. And then it hit me. What if it wasn't just any abuser? What if it was someone close to her? Someone she trusted? Later that evening, I sat with Lillian in the common room of the nursing home. She looked tired, her eyes clouded with confusion, but there was still a spark of recognition when she saw me. "Do you remember your father?" I asked softly, watching her reaction closely. Her expression darkened immediately. "He wasn't kind," she murmured, almost too quietly to hear. "He didn't believe me when I told him. About the man in the house. About the hands that hurt me." My blood ran cold. Hands that hurt her. A man in the house. It didn't take much imagination to connect the dots. "Who hurt you, Lillian?" I pressed gently. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, in a voice so small it broke my heart, she whispered, "My papa. He said I was lying. Said no one would ever believe a little girl like me." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't delusion. This was trauma. Pure, unrelenting trauma. Lillian, or Lila, if that was truly her name, hadn't vanished because she chose to leave. She'd been stolen from her life, locked away in a place designed to erase her voice. And somehow, against all odds, she'd survived. But the question remained, who else knew the truth? And how far were they willing to go to keep it buried? Some secrets don't just stay buried, they fester. They grow roots that twist and tangle until they choke the truth out of sight. That's what I realized when Carla called me again, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Ethan, I found something else," she said, her words rushing out like she couldn't hold them in any longer. "Something about Dad." Dad. Just hearing his name made my chest tighten. Up until now, I'd been chasing answers about Lila, about where she went, who took her, why no one ever looked for her. But suddenly, it felt like the trail was leading somewhere darker. Somewhere closer to home. When I got to Carla's apartment, she was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. Her laptop was open, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. She motioned for me to sit down, then slid a document across the table toward me. "This is from an old social services file," she explained. "I tracked down one of their former employees, a guy named Walter Grayson. He remembered working with Dad back in the early 80s. I scanned the page, my stomach sinking as I read the details. According to the report, our father hadn't just been some ordinary administrator overseeing local government operations. No, he'd held significant sway over decisions involving troubled youth. Including placements in private facilities like Haven Hills. What does this mean?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew. Carla leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "It means Dad wasn't just complicit in sending kids away, he orchestrated it. Whenever there was a scandal or a situation that might tarnish someone's reputation, he stepped in to fix things. Disappearances, institutionalizations, whatever it took to keep the peace. And guess what? One of those cases involved a girl named Lila Mae Carter." Lila. My hands clenched into fists, crumpling the edge of the paper. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was confirmation. But why would he do that? I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. Why would he send her away without telling anyone? Without even giving her a chance to defend herself? Carla hesitated, her expression darkening. Because he didn't want the truth to come out. Not just about Lila, but about him. Him. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. She pulled up another document on her laptop, a grainy photocopy of a letter written decades ago. Its contents were brief but damning. "To whom it may concern. Regarding the matter of patient number 237, please ensure all records remain confidential. Any inquiries should be redirected through official channels only. Public discretion is paramount." Signed beneath it was our father's name, Richard Thompson. My breath caught in my throat. So it was true. Dad had used his position to cover up what happened to Lila. To protect himself, and maybe others, from the fallout. "There's more," Carla added quietly. "Walter said Dad wasn't acting alone. He worked closely with certain families to resolve sensitive issues. Families like the Carters. The Carters. Lila's adoptive family." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. If her father had abused her, and if she'd tried to tell someone, it would have been easier to silence her than risk exposure. Sending her to Haven Hills wasn't about helping her heal, it was about erasing her. Making sure no one listened to her accusations. "Do you think Mom knew?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Carla shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe Dad kept it from her too. Either way, we're talking about a man who valued appearances above everything else, even justice." As I sat there, staring at the evidence spread out before us, rage and grief warred inside me. Rage at Dad for betraying not just Lila, but our entire family. Grief for the little girl who'd been robbed of her childhood, and for the woman she might have become if given the chance. "We need to confront her," I said finally, standing up. "Lillian, or Lila, whoever she is. She deserves to know the truth." Carla nodded, though her expression was grim. Just remember, Ethan. Once we tell her, there's no going back. And honestly, I didn't want to go back. Because for 42 years, Lila's voice had been silenced. Now, it was time to let her speak. There are times when the past speaks louder than words. When silence carries more weight than any conversation ever could. That's how I felt when I opened the small, dusty shoebox hidden in the back of Lillian's closet at the nursing home. She'd given me permission to look through her things, to search for answers, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found inside. It was filled with letters. Dozens of them. Some were neatly folded, their edges crisp despite the years that had passed. Others were crumpled, as if they'd been written in anger or despair and then hastily shoved aside. Each envelope bore a name scrawled in shaky handwriting, Ethan. My hands trembled as I picked up the first letter. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, a scent I vaguely remembered from childhood. Slowly, I unfolded it and began to read. Dear Ethan. I don't know if you'll ever see this. Maybe these words will stay locked away forever, just like me. But I wanted you to know, I haven't forgotten about you. Not for 1 second. Even here, in this place where no one listens, I still think about our orchard. About the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves and made everything feel golden. You always said we'd grow old together, didn't you? Sometimes, I let myself believe that dream is still possible. The ink smudged near the bottom, as though tears had fallen onto the page while she wrote. My throat tightened, making it hard to breathe. These weren't just letters, they were lifelines. Fragments of a soul reaching out across time and space, hoping someone would hear her cry for help. I moved on to the next one, its tone darker, heavier. They tell me I'm sick. That I imagine things. But I know what happened, Ethan. I remember his hands. His voice. The way he looked at me like I was nothing. Sometimes, I scream so loud I can barely hear myself think. But no one comes. No one cares. Except maybe you. If only you knew. Her pain bled through every word, raw and unfiltered. It wasn't paranoia or delusion, it was trauma. A little girl trapped in a nightmare, desperate for someone to save her. And instead, she'd been sent away, silenced by people who should have protected her. Letter after letter painted a picture of a life stolen. Of dreams crushed under the weight of abuse and neglect. There were moments of hope too, passages where she wrote about imagining us reuniting, about believing in a future where justice prevailed. But those glimmers of light were overshadowed by the darkness surrounding her. One letter stood out among the rest. Its date placed it near the end of her teenage years, shortly before she disappeared from Haven Hills altogether. Ethan. I don't know how much longer I can keep writing these. They say I'm getting better, but I don't feel better. I feel empty. Like part of me died a long time ago. Still, I hold on to the memory of you. To the promise we made under the apple tree. If there's even a chance you'll find me someday, please don't give up. Please remember me. By the time I reached the final letter, my vision blurred with tears. This one was short, almost fragmented, as if she'd written it in haste. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Gone from this place, at least. Maybe I'll find freedom somewhere else. Or maybe I'll vanish completely. Either way, I want you to know, I loved you. More than anything. Always. I sat there for what felt like hours, clutching the letters to my chest. Every word was a dagger, piercing deeper than I thought possible. How could anyone endure such suffering and still hold on to love? Still cling to hope? As I packed the letters back into the box, I realized something profound. Lila hadn't just survived, she'd fought. Against the lies, the isolation, the erasure of her identity. And now, decades later, her voice was finally being heard. But hearing wasn't enough. I owed her more than that. Because promises made under apple trees aren't meant to be broken. Names have power. They shape who we are, where we come from, and how the world sees us. For Lila, Lillian, as she'd been known for decades, that power had been stolen. But I wasn't going to let her live the rest of her life under someone else's shadow. Not anymore. After reading her letters, I knew what I had to do. I hired a lawyer named Rachel Meyer, not just any attorney, but one who specialized in cases involving wrongful institutionalization. She was sharp, relentless, and exactly what Lila needed to reclaim her identity. This isn't going to be easy, Rachel warned me during our first meeting. Haven Hills didn't exactly follow legal protocol back then. Most of their records were either destroyed or falsified. But if we can prove that Lillian Rose is actually Lila Mae Carter, we might stand a chance. A chance. That's all I needed to hear. The next day, I brought Rachel to Willowbrook Nursing Home to meet Lila. It wasn't an ideal situation, her lucid moments were rare, but today, she seemed present. Clear-eyed. Like she could feel the weight of what was about to happen. Lila, Rachel began gently, sitting beside her on the couch, we're here to help you get your name back. To make sure the world knows who you really are. For a moment, Lila just stared at her, as if trying to process the words. Then, slowly, she nodded. I want my name back, she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. I'm tired of being invisible. Rachel smiled softly. You won't be invisible anymore. I promise. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I worked tirelessly to gather evidence. We tracked down old medical files, dug up adoption papers, and even interviewed former staff members from Haven Hills. It was exhausting, infuriating work, but every step forward felt like a victory. Then came the twist none of us saw coming. While combing through public records, Rachel stumbled upon something extraordinary, a trust fund established by Lila's biological mother before she passed away. According to the documents, the money had been set aside specifically for Lila, to ensure she'd have financial security later in life. But because Lila had been declared missing, the funds had remained untouched. Locked away, just like her. Do you realize what this means? Rachel asked me over the phone one evening, her excitement barely contained. If we can prove her identity, not only will she reclaim her name, but she'll also inherit everything that belongs to her. Everything that belongs to her. Those words echoed in my mind long after we hung up. For 42 years, Lila had been stripped of everything, her freedom, her voice, her dignity. And now, finally, there was a chance to give some of it back. When I told Lila about the trust fund, her reaction was quiet but profound. My mother always wanted me to be safe, she murmured, staring out the window at the fading sunlight. Even when she couldn't protect me herself, she tried. She gave me something no one else could take away. Her words stayed with me long after I left the nursing home that evening. Because they weren't just about the money, they were about hope. About redemption. About finding light in the darkest corners of life. Finally, the day arrived when Rachel called me with the news I'd been waiting for. We did it, she said, her voice brimming with triumph. The court has officially recognized Lila Mae Carter as her true identity. All previous records labeling her as patient number 237 or Lillian Rose have been nullified. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thanked her. This was more than a legal win, it was justice. For Lila. For the little girl who'd been silenced for far too long. That afternoon, I went straight to Willowbrook to tell Lila herself. When I walked into her room, she was sitting by the window, gazing at the trees outside. It's done, I said, kneeling beside her chair. You're free, Lila. Free to be who you've always been. She turned to look at me, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you, she whispered, reaching out to squeeze my hand. For remembering me. And in that moment, I realized something important. Names may have power, but so do promises. Promises made under apple trees, and kept against all odds. Some truths are buried so deep, they take a lifetime to unearth. Others hide in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to pull back the curtain. That's what happened when Carla and I visited Oakwood Retirement Home, a place we hadn't thought to look until now. It started with a hunch. A tiny thread of suspicion that led us to an elderly man named Harold Grayson, who'd once lived near the orchard where Lila and I played as kids. Carla had tracked him down after hearing rumors about his sharp memory and knack for storytelling. "Mr. Grayson," Carla began cautiously as we sat across from him in the common room, "do you remember a girl named Lila Mae Carter? She disappeared back in 1981. Harold's cloudy blue eyes narrowed as he leaned forward in his chair, his gnarled hands gripping the armrests tightly. For a moment, I thought he might not recall anything. But then, something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe even regret. "Lila," he murmured, his voice raspy but clear. "Of course I remember her. Sweet girl. Always smiling, always helping her neighbors. Her adoptive family, well, let's just say they weren't kind to her." My stomach churned at his words. We already knew about the abuse. About the lies that sent her away. But there was more in Harold's tone, something darker, heavier. "What else do you know?" I asked, leaning closer. He hesitated, glancing around the room as if checking for eavesdroppers. Then, lowering his voice, he said, "I saw her the night she disappeared." "Saw who took her too?" The air seemed to freeze in my lungs. "Who took her?" Harold's gaze locked onto mine, unwavering. "Your father." "My father." The two words slammed into me like a freight train. No. It couldn't be true. Could it? "Are you sure?" Carla pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Positive," Harold replied firmly. "I was taking out the trash that evening when I saw his car pull up to the Carter's house. He got out, opened the back door, and helped Lila inside. She looked scared, like she didn't want to go, but she didn't fight him either. Like she knew it wouldn't do any good. Scared. Helpless. Taken against her will." My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of that fateful night. Had Dad orchestrated the entire thing? Was this why he'd hidden those letters, paid off Willow Creek, erased every trace of her existence? But Harold wasn't finished yet. "There's something else," he added, his voice dropping even lower. "Months later, I overheard your father talking to someone on the phone. He sounded panicked. Kept saying things like, 'She knows too much, and we can't risk exposure.' At the time, I didn't think much of it. But looking back..." His voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavy in the air. "You think he meant to kill her?" Carla blurted out, her face pale. Harold shrugged, his expression grim. "I don't know what he intended. All I know is that sending her to Haven Hills wasn't about protecting her. It was about silencing her. Permanently." The room spun around me as the weight of his words sank in. My own father, the man who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd hugged me after Mom died, had been capable of such cruelty. Of snatching a child away from everything she loved and locking her in a nightmare. Why would he do it? I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "Power," Harold answered simply. "Men like your father don't like loose ends. Especially ones that threaten their reputation." As we left Oakwood that afternoon, I felt sick to my stomach. Every step forward uncovered another layer of betrayal, another piece of the puzzle that painted a picture too monstrous to comprehend. Back at home, Carla turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Do you think she knew? About Dad, I mean." I shook my head, though I wasn't sure. If she did, she never said anything. Maybe she blocked it out. Or maybe she chose to forgive him. Forgiveness. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. How could anyone forgive such a crime? But then I thought of Lila, the woman she'd become despite everything. Strong. Resilient. Still clinging to hope, even after all these years. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about excusing the unforgivable. Maybe it was about choosing to move forward anyway. Because vengeance wouldn't bring her justice. Only the truth could do that. There comes a point in every journey where you can no longer turn back. For me, that moment arrived when Rachel, our lawyer, called an emergency meeting with Carla and me. Her voice on the phone was tense, urgent, like she'd uncovered something too big to ignore. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "It's about your father." When we arrived at her office later that day, she was already waiting for us, a stack of documents spread across her desk. The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of what we were about to learn. "I filed a motion to reopen the financial records tied to your father's estate," Rachel explained, her eyes locking onto mine. "What I found, it doesn't paint a pretty picture." She slid a folder toward me, its contents neatly organized but undeniably damning. Bank statements, invoices, payment logs, all meticulously catalogued under aliases and shell companies. At first glance, they seemed innocuous enough. But as I flipped through them, a chilling pattern emerged. For 7 years after Lila's disappearance, my father had been funneling money into an account linked to Haven Hills. Not just small payments either, thousands of dollars at a time. Payments labeled as youth rehabilitation fees. "This isn't just funding," Rachel said quietly. "This is control. Your father didn't just send Lila away, he kept her there. Kept her silenced, out of sight, for as long as he could afford to." The room spun around me, the words hitting like blows. 7 years. 7 long years of paying to keep her locked up while pretending she didn't exist. All to protect his reputation. His legacy. Carla reached out to steady me, her hand trembling almost as much as mine. "Why would he do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could he live with himself?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I didn't want one. Because the truth was staring me in the face, ugly and unrelenting. My father wasn't just complicit in Lila's suffering, he was the architect of it. But Rachel wasn't done yet. "There's more," she continued, pulling out another document. "I cross-referenced these payments with medical records from Haven Hills. Turns out, your father wasn't just funding her stay, he was actively involved in her treatment plan. Notes from doctors mention consultations with him, decisions made based on his input. Decisions that kept her isolated, medicated, and compliant." Compliant. The word made bile rise in my throat. They hadn't been treating her, they'd been breaking her. Turning a vibrant, fearless little girl into a shadow of herself. And all because she'd dared to speak the truth. "We need to take this to the police," Carla insisted, her voice rising with urgency. "They have to reopen the case. This proves everything." Rachel nodded grimly. "Agreed. But be prepared, it's not going to be easy. Cases like this, especially ones involving someone as powerful as your father, tend to get buried again unless we push hard." Push hard. That's exactly what we did. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly to gather every scrap of evidence we could find. Financial records, medical files, testimonies from former staff at Haven Hills, even Harold Grayson's account of seeing my father the night Lila disappeared. By the time we presented it all to Detective Harris, the man who'd originally dismissed the cold case, even he couldn't deny the mountain of proof staring him in the face. "This changes everything," he admitted, flipping through the documents with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "If half of this is true, your father wasn't just covering up abuse, he was orchestrating it." Orchestrating it. The phrase echoed in my mind, hollow and suffocating. How could I reconcile the man I thought I knew, the man who'd taught me how to ride a bike, who'd hugged me after Mom died, with the monster revealed in these papers? That night, I sat alone in my living room, staring at an old family portrait hanging on the wall. In it, Dad stood tall and proud, his arms slung casually over my shoulder. I used to think it was a picture of strength, of unity. Now, it felt like a lie. How could you? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. How could you do that to her? To me? Because it wasn't just Lila he'd hurt, it was all of us. He'd poisoned our family tree, leaving behind roots tangled with secrets and shame. And now, decades later, it was up to me to dig them out. There are moments in life that feel like they were pulled straight from a dream. Moments so fragile, so fleeting, that you cling to them with everything you have, knowing they'll never come again. That's how it felt when Lila woke up one morning and looked at me, not as a stranger, not as someone lost in the fog of memory, but as the little girl I used to know. The one who'd promised to marry me under the apple tree. Ethan, she said softly, her voice clear and steady for the first time in weeks. It's really you. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Lila? Do you remember me? She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with tears. Of course I remember you. How could I forget? For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the years of searching, of wondering, of fighting to uncover the truth, it all came rushing back in a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked me off my feet. You're here, I managed finally, taking her hand in mine. You're really here. Her grip tightened slightly, grounding me in the present. I always knew you'd find me, she whispered. Even when I thought I was alone, I held on to that promise. The one we made under the tree. The one we made under the tree. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, but in the best possible way. Because she was right, we had made a promise. A silly, childish vow that somehow carried us through decades of separation and pain. Do you want to go there? I asked suddenly, the idea forming before I even realized it. To the orchard? Her smile widened, lighting up her face in a way I hadn't seen in years. Yes, she said simply. Take me home. So that's what we did. Carla helped arrange transportation, bundling Lila up in blankets despite the warm spring air. Rachel insisted on coming along too, though she stayed quietly in the background, giving us space to breathe, to reconnect. When we arrived at Brookside Orchard, it was exactly as I remembered it, or maybe better. The trees were taller now, their branches heavy with blossoms that swayed gently in the breeze. The grass smelled sweet, like earth and sunlight mingling together. It was perfect. Lila stepped out of the car slowly, steadying herself against my arm. For a long moment, she just stood there, drinking it all in, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, the faint scent of apples lingering in the air. It's beautiful, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. We walked hand in hand toward our favorite spot, the place where we'd carved our initials into the bark of an old oak tree. Time had weathered the marks, but they were still there, a testament to a childhood neither of us had fully let go of. Look, Lila said, running her fingers over the faded letters. E+L, forever. Forever. Such a simple word, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime. I'm sorry it took me so long to keep my promise, I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. I should have found you sooner. But Lila shook her head, her expression soft but firm. You didn't fail me, Ethan. You gave me hope. Even when I thought no one would ever believe me, I knew you would. Someday. Tears streamed down my face as I pulled her into a hug, holding her as tightly as I dared. She felt frail in my arms, delicate, but also strong. Stronger than anyone I'd ever known. Thank you, she whispered, her breath warm against my shoulder. For remembering me. And in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of our past and the beauty of the orchard, I realized something profound. Promises aren't just words, they're lifelines. Threads that connect us to each other, even when the world tries to tear us apart. Because some promises are worth keeping. No matter how long it takes. Some endings aren't marked by grand gestures or dramatic farewells. Sometimes, they're quiet. Gentle. Like the last breath of a candle before it flickers out. That's how Lila left us, in the soft light of dawn, her chest rising and falling one final time as the world outside stirred to life. When Nurse Margaret called me that morning, her voice was heavy with sorrow but tinged with something else too, peace. She passed in her sleep, she said gently. No pain. Just stillness. I didn't cry when I heard the news. Not right away. Instead, I drove to Willowbrook in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The orchard was still fresh in my mind, the way she'd smiled at me under the apple trees, the way her fingers had traced the initials we'd carved into the bark. She'd looked so alive then, so present, that it felt impossible to believe she was gone now. But when I walked into her room and saw her lying there, peaceful and serene, the dam broke. Tears streamed down my face, silent but relentless. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine for the last time. It was cold, but I held on anyway, as if letting go might mean losing her all over again. You kept your promise, I whispered, brushing a strand of silver hair from her forehead. And I kept mine. We made it back to the orchard, just like we said we would. For a long moment, I stayed there, saying goodbye in the only way I knew how, with words that couldn't be spoken aloud. Words about love, forgiveness, and promises that spanned decades. Later that evening, Carla and Rachel helped me organize a small memorial service in the garden behind the nursing home. It wasn't much, just candles, flowers, and the letters Lila had written me over the years, but it felt right. Like a proper send-off for someone who deserved more than the world had ever given her. As I lit the first candle, I noticed one of her letters sitting among the others. Its edges were worn, as though it had been folded and unfolded countless times. I picked it up, recognizing her handwriting immediately. Ethan. If you're reading this, it means I'm finally free. Free from the pain, the memories, the lies. But most of all, free to thank you, for never giving up on me. You were my anchor in the storm, even when I couldn't see you. Even when I thought no one could hear me. Please don't grieve for me. Instead, remember the orchard. Remember the laughter, the sunlight, the promises we made. Because those moments, they're forever. Her words blurred through my tears, but their meaning was clear. Lila hadn't wanted pity or sadness. She'd wanted peace, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of joy. So that's what I gave her. As the candles burned low, casting flickering shadows across the garden, I placed the letter back among the others and stood up. My heart still ached, but it also felt lighter, like a weight I'd carried for 42 years had finally been lifted. Goodbye, Lila, I murmured, looking up at the stars. Thank you for trusting me. For believing in me. I'll keep our promise alive, for both of us. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of night and the faint scent of blooming flowers, I realized something important. Endings aren't always final. Sometimes, they're beginnings disguised as goodbyes. Because some promises, no matter how far apart two people may drift, are strong enough to transcend even death. There's something about planting a tree that feels like closing a circle. Like taking the scattered pieces of your past and weaving them into something new, something that will grow and thrive long after you're gone. That's what I did yesterday, on a quiet patch of land behind my house. The same land where Lila and I used to play as kids. I dug the hole myself, my hands caked with dirt and sweat dripping down my face in the midday sun. It wasn't easy work. Not at my age, but every shovelful felt like a step closer to healing. Closer to honoring the girl who'd shaped so much of my life, even when she wasn't there to see it. When the sapling was finally in place, I stood back and looked at it for a long time. Its branches were small and fragile now, but I knew they'd grow stronger with each passing year. Just like the memories I carried with me. Later that afternoon, my granddaughter Lily came over. She's 8 years old, bright-eyed and curious, just like Lila had been at that age. She followed me outside, her sneakers crunching softly against the grass as she peered up at me with wide eyes. "Grandpa," she asked, tilting her head slightly, "what kind of tree is that?" I smiled, kneeling down beside her so we were eye to eye. "It's an apple tree," I said, brushing a stray leaf from its trunk. "And it's special because it reminds me of someone very important." She frowned thoughtfully, her little brow furrowing. "Who?" "Her name was Lila," I began, my voice softening as I leaned against the shovel. "She was my best friend when I was your age. We used to climb trees together, pick apples, and dream about all the adventures we'd have when we grew up. But then, something happened. Something that took her away from me for a very long time." Lily's eyes widened. "What happened?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Life got complicated. People made mistakes. And sometimes, things get lost that shouldn't be. But no matter how far apart we were, I never stopped thinking about her. About the promises we made under the stars. "What kind of promises?" Lily pressed, clearly intrigued. "The kind that last forever," I replied, glancing up at the sky. "We promised to always find our way back to each other. And even though it took us a lifetime, we did. In the end, love found its way home." She didn't fully understand, I could tell by the puzzled look on her face, but she nodded anyway, satisfied enough with the answer. "Will the tree grow big like the ones in the orchard?" she asked, pointing toward the horizon where Brookside Orchard still stood. "Bigger," I said with a chuckle. "And one day, when you're older, you can bring your own kids here to pick apples from it. Maybe even tell them the story of Lila and me." Her face lit up at the idea. "I'd like that." As we walked back inside together, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder at the young sapling swaying gently in the breeze. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. A reminder that love doesn't disappear, it simply waits. Waits for the right moment to bloom again. Because true love isn't forgotten, it's remembered. Even if it takes a lifetime to come full circle. Every story leaves a mark. A lesson etched into the hearts of those who hear it, if they're willing to listen. For me, Lila's story taught me something I'll carry with me until my last breath: love doesn't fade, it endures. Even when it's buried beneath lies, betrayal, and years of silence, it finds a way to resurface. It may take decades, even a lifetime, but true connection has a way of coming home. This journey wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about reclaiming what mattered most. Promises kept. Memories honored. Lives reclaimed from the shadows. And while not every story ends with the happily ever after we dream of, there's beauty in closure. In knowing that you've done everything you can to make things right. But here's the thing about stories, they don't exist in isolation. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways we can't always predict. Maybe Lila's story will remind you of someone in your own life. Someone you've lost touch with or someone you've been meaning to reconnect with. Maybe it'll inspire you to dig deeper, to seek out the truths that have been hidden for too long. Or maybe it'll simply remind you that love, no matter how complicated, is always worth fighting for. If this story resonated with you, I urge you to take a moment to reflect on the connections in your own life. Who are the people who shaped you? The ones who believed in you when no one else did? And what promises, spoken or unspoken, are still waiting to be fulfilled? And if you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There are more stories like this one waiting to be told, stories of hope, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. Stories that will stay with you long after the credits roll. So hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and join us for the next chapter. Because trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Lila and Ethan's journey? Did their story move you, frustrate you, or inspire you to look at your own life differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. After all, storytelling isn't just about the person speaking, it's about the people listening. And your voice matters. Until next time, keep seeking the truth. Keep honoring the promises that matter. And above all, never stop believing in the power of love to light the way, even in the darkest of times.